The story begins with showing us an airplane flying in the Arctic. Suddenly the weather changes, it gets colder and the plane crashes. After a while the people inside the plane regain consciousness and come out of the plane. There is a man named Amundsen who is very old. They say this is his last journey in Europe. Amundsen's brother Lion goes to a house, he starts looking for something, but then the owner of the house attacks him. But soon he starts telling her about himself, saying that he is not a thief, he is Amundsen's brother. This woman's name was Base and she had a connection with Amundsen. Amundsen went on a final trip on a coach, but he didn't come back, he was already very old and people started thinking he had died. Ba and Lion are sitting together and that's where the real story begins. Lion tells Amundsen's brother about when they were young. Our father, who was a captain of a ship, used to tell us stories of his travels. He was a human who taught us about the North Pole and the South Pole. He said that no human had ever been there before. He loved the stories of Amundsen, who explored those places. The North Pole and the South Pole were always on his mind. He would stay up late reading books about explorers and preparing himself for tough conditions, like keeping himself in cold water to toughen his body. In those days a Norwegian explorer had crossed Greenland and returned as a winner. We saw his success with our own eyes. This inspired Amundsen to have a strong desire inside him. One day we heard the news that our father's ship had sunk in the sea. We couldn't even find his body. A few months later our mother fell ill and also passed away, but Amundsen always kept his dreams alive. When we grew up a little we went to snowy areas in Norway. There was a danger of a storm those days, but we intentionally wanted to spend the night there. We were just wandering around and we got separated from each other. Amundsen got tired so he lay down there. When his eyes opened after a while he was buried in snow, he couldn't get out himself. I was worried about my brother so I started looking for him. I saw some things and started removing the snow from there. When we came out, instead of being worried, Amundsen started laughing. I didn't understand why he was like that. Maybe he felt something that I didn't feel. A few years later Amundsen found the last route of the Northwest Passage. We went to England. He told us about his journey. He learned a lot there because there are some tribes in the north. He learned how to live there. They use dogs for their journey. They walk slowly so they don't sweat because that increases the risk of death. The British Council didn't take Amundsen seriously, and why would they? How could they praise a Norwegian? After the meeting Amundsen meets British explorer Scott at a party, and from his conversations Amundsen learns that Scott is going to the South Pole. If he succeeds it will be known as the last exploration of the world. Scott had dreamed of discovering the poles since childhood. He talks to his brother about it. These two plan that Scott has been preparing to go to the South Pole for the past 4 years. He studies the weather there. Amundsen and Lion have made a secret decision to keep something hidden from the British so they don't find out. They only tell their ambassador about it because he was going to give money for this course. The ambassador had told Amundsen and his brother that he would give them money for this course, but they would have to go to the North Pole to prove some theories right. This means it will be a scientific exploration. Amundsen and Lion prepare a team. Just a few days before they leave they find out that a person named Frederick has claimed that he has already been to the North Pole, but he hasn't provided any proof yet. Still, he was getting a lot of attention everywhere. Amundsen feels unhappy when he hears this news. It is said that the search is over. He was very sad. That evening an idea comes to his mind that where all the things, the bad ones, are with them, why not go to the South Pole instead of the North Pole? They make the decision, but the ambassador does not give him permission for this. So Amundsen had to keep this a secret. They load supplies on the ship, and when they leave they send a letter to the ambassador saying that they have left for the South Pole. When the news reaches the British explorer Scott, he doesn't like it. He says it's not a search, it's a competition. Before starting the journey Amundsen asks his crew if they will support his changed plan. Johnson is not happy with this decision even though he doesn't want to. He says yes. In a few months they reach Antarctica, the coldest place in the world. They build their base there in September 1919. A group of people were trying to reach the South Pole for the first time, but they couldn't go further because there was a dangerous snowstorm. They were afraid of getting separated from each other. Amundsen told everyone that they had to find their way back alone. Many people returned to the camp. Johnson and a boy arrived at night. John had helped the boy. Johnson got angry at Amundsen for being selfish and only caring about his own name. Amundsen told him that this was a journey of death. Didn't I clearly say to find the way alone? Losing someone, dying, getting hurt, these things are not a big deal. You should have thought about it before going on the search. The next day Amundsen sent Johnson back and told him to make a map of the area nearby. Then on October 20th they tried again to reach the South Pole. The weather changed a little bit. They left their camp and set up small camps in different places. The journey was becoming difficult and the days were passing. One day one of them went to pee. They were actually on a glacier. Suddenly the ice started to break. They managed to save themselves by holding on to each other. But their supplies fell. Even if their food had lasted, they could have ended their surge, because Amundsen had learned in the north that dogs are good to use in the snow. That's why he brought dogs with him. They were pulling the same supplies. And a British explorer, Scott, didn't choose dogs, he chose horses. Anyway, he was behind them. After a month of walking they reached the mountains, where Amundsen named each peak after his team members. They had run out of food by then. They were going to eat the dogs from now on. They continued their journey and finally 40 days later they reached the center of the South Pole. They were all very happy. Amundsen's dream had finally come true. They celebrated there and raised the flag of Norway. Amundsen left a letter for Scott saying that if they arrived there after them they should deliver the letter to the King of Norway, and he hoped they would return home safe and sound. Actually, Amundsen took a long route, so it would take him a long time to return. Scott took a shorter route so he would reach home before them on December 14th. Amundsen named the South Pole after himself, his brother who was in Norway, because he had to raise funds. When he received the letter that Amundsen had completed his expedition, the whole world knew about it. A few months later, when Scott arrived there in the North Pole, there was a sad man because someone from Norway named this place after himself. When Scott and his team were coming back they had to go through very harsh weather. One by one everyone died after returning from Antarctica. Amundsen was called to England, but instead of being praised there he was insulted a lot, and Scott was considered a British hero. Amundsen met a woman named Banner during a party who was someone else's wife, but Amundsen was weak because he liked married women. The man he had found through his expedition. Now he knew that Amundsen and the rest had succeeded with great sadness. He takes his own life in Norway. There is a big celebration in Amundsen's name. And Amundsen says that his journey does not end here, but now he will go to the North Pole and prove polar caring. Reporting Flow TV, this will be a 5-year search that will make Norway proud. Well, everyone was happy, but Bees wasn't happy about one thing. She wanted to stay with Amundsen. But Amundsen told her that he would come back soon, then they would be together. After a few years, Amundsen and his companions built a ship for this exploration. They named it Mound. Their goal was to study the flow of water, but this expedition was very risky. The people who invested their money in this day. He escaped a bear attack. Over time his interest was fading away. One day these people were on the ship when some people came for help. They were from the nearby tribes. Their little girl was sick and these people were helping her. Slowly Amundsen started to bond with their daughters. He considered them as his own daughter. The girls were also very happy with Amundsen. Now they started living on the ship, and then one day he came back without his coach. This time he had a new plan. He said that we will fly to the North Pole. No one has ever gone there by plane before. But I will do it. He left the ship and his crew alone. He stayed in that snowy hell for 7 years. In the end he went bankrupt. Many of them died and those who were alive had their lives ruined. Amundsen was selfish. He went to his brother to collect money for another plane, but his brother didn't help him. This time Amundsen had changed. He started seeing his coach as a game. Their paths diverged. After a few years Amundsen somehow found money and bought a plane. He went to the North Pole, but his plane crashed because of the cold. They stayed there for a few weeks. The people in the world thought maybe he died. But that wasn't the case. They fixed the plan again and came back. Ba and Lion were at home when they heard the news that Amundsen had completed his exploration. A few days later Ba and Lion went to meet Amundsen. But Amundsen had now left his brother just like everyone else. Many years had passed, so Amundsen had become old. He wrote a book in which he did not mention his brother nor the ambassador nor the king, because Amundsen wanted to take all the credit himself. In the year 1918 some Norwegian explorers in Antarctica went on a rescue mission with his companions, but their ship crashed there and Amundsen got lost in the North Pole forever. And this is the end of this story. Thanks for watching.